Hello, welcome back. So, I decided, I've been doing a lot of tutorials lately for making LOL specific characters and such. And I thought, I should probably do something more with the tutorial stuff. And I thought, what, why don't I just do like a whole series and stuff on giving like advice to newer people that are kind of just getting in to this community and they want to like, oh, I want to create stuff too. Now, I can't give advice for everything, obviously. I don't have a law. But I feel like I have like enough of a stacked up knowledge from being around like in this community for so long, seeing like where things kind of like start kind of falling apart for creators or like where they kind of struggle. And I figured, I can at least compile all this together into like a quick, another quick video to kind of guide you along in making your law. So yeah. Uh, so today, the first thing I'm going to talk about with Lawl, and I think it's probably like the most obvious thing I think you're all thinking of, making your roster. So the roster aspect is the main core of like your what you're creating. You want to make sure all the characters, you have all your funny people you want to show off to everyone else. You want to make sure it's appealing, obviously, but I mean, like at the end of the day, you want to make sure it's you. But before we even get into any of that, the first thing I strongly suggest before you even start like, oh, I want to make a bunch of this characters, like just write down a whole list of like things you enjoy first and foremost. Don't start thinking about people. Like just think about like what you like. It's just you're going to be spending a lot of time like what you're making, so you want to make sure like you love all these characters. You're like very passionate about stuff, so you want to just compile like a lot of stuff you're just passionate about. And at the start, obviously, I strongly suggest, like, when you're brainstorming, again, brainstorming is brainstorming. Just throw everything at the wall, write everything down. Don't worry about, like, having too much. This is like the spitballing phase. What would be a cool idea? Just, whatever sounds interesting to you. And then, once you have all those characters down, then you start cutting the roster down. One of the biggest killers of a LoL roster I've always seen in this community, and it happened to me too, is when your roster gets too big starting out. I strongly encourage you, like, okay, it's okay to have a lot of ideas, but you can't let your focus get too wide. Keep it down to like I can't give an exact number because it will depend from person to person, but I feel like it should be very, very small. I think even like 6 is like the maximum you should probably start out with. Think of like 6 characters to put on a screen. And I know what you're thinking, oh, but there's only like 6 characters, no one's gonna really want to watch it. Don't worry about that. Right now we're just trying to like keep it simple. Like think of like some like concrete characters you want to do right now. If you start adding on like a bunch of ideas you want to do later, that gets very, very difficult, and you'll start thinking about those more than you're thinking about the characters you should be having out right now. You'll never get anything done. It happened to me. It's gonna happen to you too. And now that we're narrowing down the roster size, we want to start looking through the characters you have. And I think one of the biggest things you want to start looking at is what characters are there on your roster that are already in another fighting game or a platform fighter. And I specifically add fighting game in here because I think it's something that's not really ever been discussed in the LoL community. It's kind of happened now and then, but like no one's ever really like put something out there about it, and I feel like this is a good time for me to do this. Inherently, fighting game characters are not very interesting. I'm sorry to say, like. And that might seem mean, like, oh, but like putting like Ryu or like a Scorpion or like someone else in like a platform fighter is interesting. Why can't like I do it in LoL? And inherently, the problem with this is like, if you're putting a platform fighting game character into a LoL, you come up with a problem of, okay, how do I make them interesting? Because it can quickly devolve into you just putting the moveset into a platform fighter setting, and that can be interesting on that, but like if someone already like knows the character, they know what they're gonna do. There's not really anything interesting here that they're gonna be excited about. It's just the character. So you can like tweak some values around. You can like mess with some things, but inherently, like, at the end of the day, when you're putting a fighting game character in a moveset for LoL, a lot of it is just putting sprites in, and then that's it. It's not very interesting. It could be good practice. I think if you want to do that, like, as a starting out, I don't think it's entirely a bad thing, but it's not the craziest idea. I still think if you want to, you can go ahead. I've seen some good fighting game characters done well in LoL, but generally not many people are passionate about it or very interested. So that's just something to keep in mind. And obviously like platform fighter characters. I think this is a tough one, especially because this is again, LoL has always been a thing. Like, I want to add like characters to LoL that aren't going to ever be added to Smash Brothers. But Smash has kind of already become like everyone wants to be in Smash now. Every video game character wants to be in Smash. And then even non-video game characters are getting their own like Smash games. You got Multiverses, you got Nazby. You've got Kung Fu Panda, platform fighter that's, delisted. Like, it's complicated. So like that kind of depends from like character to character. I say if they have enough material that if you think you can make the character differently with your moveset compared to what was already done in a platform fighter, then it's okay. But generally, like, don't make another Mario. It depends. Like, some Marios are good ideas, but LoL has a lot of Marios. And something you'll quickly notice is a lot of them, like, well, some of them are interesting. They play differently. A lot of them are just different Marios. They're not very inherently interesting, I think. Sorry, that's just kind of how it is, And next thing you want to do is, are you passionate about them? Can you think of a baseline moveset right now? This is something I think this is like something you want to consider when you're cutting down the characters you enjoy. So you have to, again, keep in mind you're going to be spending a lot of time with these characters, and you need to be prepared that are you going to want to bring them back in future videos for any reason? Like, at some point, maybe you'll fall out of liking this character, and they'll kind of become, like, a part of your history. And I think it's okay to leave a LoL character in your roster for, like, historic sake. Just, like, yeah, I was into that once. I'm not as passionate about it anymore. But it's cool, it's something cool to have there, and then you don't want to, like, take them away because you're not very passionate anymore. But and you can even, like, if you start to dislike a character, though, like, then it's going to become a bit of a problem. I think it's easy to kind of turn a character into a bit of a punching bag within your own LoL. That's fine. Like, it's okay to be a little bit silly with it. Again, this is meant to be a for fun thing. But you don't want to, like, pick up a trendy character or, like, a character of the time right now. Like, oh yeah, that's a funny meme. I want to do that right now. And then, like, a couple months later, you're like, I'm not really passionate about this anymore, I'll stop. Or you're kind of jumping into, like, a character that's more of, like, a temporary thing. It's just like, oh, there's some cool ideas here. I guess I could make a move about that. But you personally don't want to, you're not very passionate about it. Maybe you can cut them right now. Starting out, you want to make sure that you have the energy to spare on these ideas. And another important step we're going to look at, and this is a very big one, would they be difficult to spray? So, this is one that I think not many people think about, unfortunately. This is, like, kind of a thing where, like, you have to go in expecting, what am I working with here? Like, what is this character's source? And most of the time, this isn't complicated. Like, if you're practicing animation and you're kind of getting comfortable with Frankensteining and sprite editing, this won't be that bad. The problem comes in when you're dealing with characters with a limited source or not having legs. Legs are the big core of how do I make a character, like, move and animate. You gotta remember that. What do you need to make this character do? You need to make them jump. You need to make them run. You need to make them walk. You need to make them, like, get knocked back. So you gotta have, like, some kind of, like, pose where the legs are kind of closer together and they're bent or they're, like, stretched out or running. There's a lot of things you have to keep in mind with motion. And this is often a killer for visual novel characters. A lot of visual novel characters, they might have some CGs, but you're going to be spending a lot of time probably trying to make them, like, animate. and that's often like going to exhaust you very, very quickly. This also like can become a problem with more hand-drawn characters that you might need to like sprite yourself. They might not have enough assets that are big enough to work with. You'll have to animate them and draw them. Some Lawlers are good at drawing, and that's how we kind of have characters like the Batter in Zack and Tetris. But not everybody is, good at drawing, and that's unfortunately just kind of a hard truth. And that's something you want to keep in mind. Like, can I do this? Can I do this for, like, not just all of their, like, base animations, but all their specials, their normal attacks? Like, how much energy are you willing to put into this? Especially when you have, like, a small list of characters, you want to make sure, this isn't too hard for you. And the next thing I want to talk about is, do they have too much material? And this isn't the one that you probably won't run into at all, but this is still something to consider. This mostly comes out with YouTubers and actors, which we don't have enough of, or unfortunately. This is for a good reason, because actors and YouTubers inherently, they have a long filmography, or they have a long career right now. Or, halfway through the career, they change careers to do something else. So what happens when PewDiePie suddenly stops becoming really the brofist guy, and he's whatever he's doing right now? What happens if The Rock stops wrestling and he wants to be an actor now? Okay, now you have to decide which aspect of the character do you want to focus and hone in on. And unfortunately, it just becomes too difficult to do that. Like, you'll end up like missing like a whole half of the character you couldn't reach before, because there's just too much. And again, though, thankfully this isn't very common. This is only something that'll come up like very rarely with big name people. But this, again, like making a moveset is inherently going to be difficult if you're stretched thin and they have like a lot of stuff to look forward to. Especially if they're like a public domain character that's been around for like more than 20 years. That's 20 years of stuff you're gonna have to look through. Does that sound fun? It probably doesn't sound fun. So that's the thing you want to keep in mind. And next one, are they a good idea? This one kind of goes without saying. There's obviously some characters that you probably shouldn't make. Some characters that have some kind of like a bad history with them. Some political figures. I'm not saying names. I'm just saying, like, anyone that's noteworthy and for some kind of bad reason, I might attract a bad crowd. Unless you have like a really good idea, but even then, I feel like there are just some characters you just don't touch. Like, are they in good taste? Like it's just some things are just bad ideas. If you're going to like make it more of like a moveset where you're kind of poking at the person itself. Like a DSP, is one that I would consider, that's pretty good. But generally, like, it's maybe better not to touch them. But yeah, that's mostly it. Once you have a reasonable roster size, at this point, you can start planning and spreading movesets with a program you prefer. Which is, I can't personally name a program for you right now. There's the Lawlorial that Skap made. But generally, like, whenever you're making your first moveset, I always say, take it slow. Don't worry about a schedule and try avoiding being perfectionist. Being a perfectionist is what killed my Lawl, personally. And also just everything was too complicated. I think it's important that, there's a lot of really high concept movesets out right now, but when you're starting out, you do want to keep it simple, because it's like, obviously you're animating for the first time. Don't worry about like attracting a bunch of people. Just, it's okay to take it easy a little bit. I know I talk a lot about don't make it simple projectiles and stuff, but when you're starting out, like, it's okay to have like some very simplistic characters. You can come back and patch them later if you're not too happy with them. But only later. Like, right now, just what matters is you're having fun animating these characters and doing what they do. Let me see. I think I can show something fun for you today. So I'll show you personally. Let's see here. Well, let me just like post a picture. We'll do it like this. Okay. So this is like a old picture of my roster. uh, this is very old now, obviously. Not much of it would change at this point, but I still feel like this is like a good list of characters to kind of like describe. Okay, like if I wanted to like had 6 characters written down, I knocked it down this far. What are the problems that I would still run into? I'm gonna tell you right now, like from each character specifically. So we have Battler from Yumi Neko on the left. He's a character that has a fighting game to his name, and he has enough material that you could still make a unique moveset out of him, but it would still be very difficult to sprite him. It would still be very difficult to animate him because he is a visual novel character, and he has a very short-lived anime and some pachinko cutscenes. I would have to dig through all of those if I wanted to like find good running sprites and like pull assets for like actual attacks and such. Because even like the fighting game doesn't cover everything, and even then like the pachinko cutscenes kind of have a different art style. It's just it would be a lot to work with. And then we have Neku Sakuraba from the Rollins with You. He has a whole list of like sprites to work with. Sprite characters are very inherently much easier to work with. But the problem you start to come in with the fact is, okay, but this character has a giant like kit of like pins and to attack with, and he has no real like outside of the anime, he has some cannon pins, but his whole thing is that he can use all of them. Like he's like a pin master, so like you have to like decide, okay, what would be good in this move? What's good enough to be a special move? How do I interpret this like the partner gimmick? It's just a lot to think about. And then we have Frank West. I wanted to make, Frank West from specifically the first Dead Rising. He has an in-game model that I could work with. And the idea that I had is I wanted to basically download the game on Steam and get frames for every single animation to put them in like a moveset video. So I would have to line him up sideways and make sure the camera would follow him like that. And then get frame by frame by frame. Does that sound fun? It's inherently easier to do because you don't have to Frankenstein much, but it is still busy work. It is still a lot of busy work. And then Teruteru Hanamura. I still have a pretty concretely designed moveset in my head for what he would do, but he's a visual novel character. Again, I would have to basically Frankenstein a lot. I would have to really get into the animations of what he has, and he doesn't have that much. He doesn't have that much where he's in motion, because again, he's a visual novel character. I think the only thing he has is like a clip from the anime, but that's literally it. So it would be really, really hard. Imagine trying to like animate like a recovery and like a final smash. Oh, that'd be awful. That'd be horrible to do. And then Wilson. He's a character from Don't Starve. He would also be simple. He has a lot of sprites to work with, so he would probably be like the easiest to work with out of all of these, because he has a lot of assets that are already made for him. All of them are in pieces, so it would just be a matter of like putting them back together. Honestly, yeah, he would be the easiest to work with if I went back to him. But then you have a character like Ayumi from Corpse Party. So inherently, she's another sprite-based character, but the problem is that she's working with a much more limited sprite base. And it kind of runs into like the Dreamer problem that that Irene originally ran into, where I would have to really like stretch some animations and like make them bigger, but I don't really have the skill to like draw or animate sprites that well. So there comes another problem. Well, if I can't draw, how can I make this character do basic attacks for like a normal showcase in the future if I ever wanted to do that? I'd probably have to knock her off or find something else or get some help. It would be very difficult. So yeah, these are the things you need to think of. Even when you knock it down this low, you gotta like think ahead. Like, okay, what do I have to work with here? If I had these characters, it would be difficult. It would be very hard. And unfortunately, as passionate as I am about these characters, animating them would be hard to do. It would be very painful, and I could never I got far enough. But eventually I started, I couldn't do these characters. I can't do them, unfortunately. I don't have the time or the energy to do that. So Law Chaos never happened. I still wish I could do it someday, but, you know, as is, I can't really do that. But yeah, no. So, I want you to, like, take this to heart, you know? Don't make the same mistakes I did. Like, it is way too easy to get stuck and not get anything done. But it's also important, you know, like, remember, what can you do at your skill level right now? Like, I'm sure, you know, people would be willing to kind of, like, pass some more advice along for how they animate, how they use their specific programs, whether it's Pivot or Vegas or whatever. I encourage you to ask around. We're generally very, you know, open to how, you know, how do we do our process a little bit. But it is hard, so I can't blame you. If like you're seeing all this, you're like, oh, I can't do this. Don't worry, I'm the same way. I couldn't do it. It's totally fair. It's totally fair. But yeah, hopefully this is helpful for you. I'll probably make another one of these. Obviously, this is just the roster itself. Like, there's a lot more to talk about with Lawl when it comes to the future of it. After you get your first movesets coming out, like, and when you're designing a moveset, like, there's a lot more to, you know, consider. So yeah, I'll probably make another video about that soon. But yeah, that's it for now. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye bye.